Do you do? Have a chumash? Grab a chumash money right there. What is it? It's biblical. An old that I spoke about it.
Did they show you how to do
How not to do it. And it's both ways. What a ruckus of a crowd here we got. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started in just a minute on page 1092 in our Chumash, in the Life Chumash. Oh, Eliyahu's here. Very special night. I have two of my children in class tonight, not just Chaya and not just many, but many and Chaya. It's a combination, combustible spiritual combination. Many. Not on my show furniture. Okay, what is what? A Machaya? Many and Chaya equals a Machaya. Very good. Good one, Seth. Good one. You get credit when credit is due. Most of them are corny, but this one you got. A good one. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've shared it on all the platforms, and we are ready to go. Let me just make sure that we go. I'm sure in the next minute or two, a couple of others will join. I'll let them in, but let's begin tonight. We just came from Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av was on Sunday. I hope everyone had an easy fast. We are now going into the 7 weeks, the 7 Shabbos between now and Rosh Hashanah. So we had Gimel de Puranusa. There was the 3 weeks of rebuke that started 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, where God rebukes. In the Haftorah, we read about the rebuke to the Jewish people for their negative behavior. And then we begin, this Shabbos begins the Shiva de Mechemta, the 7 Shabboses of comfort, where God comforts the Jewish people for the tsaras, for the struggle that they have, and promises and pledges that they will have a bright future. So we are a conundrum, the Jewish people. We are a walking contradiction. Some days Hashem is really happy with us. Some days He wants to comfort us. Some days He wants to rebuke us. Some days He wants to knock us into shape. Some days He wants to unknock us out of shape. He wants to make things better for us because He feels bad. So it's like a form of parenting. So on page 1092, and we're going to talk about the chronology of the verses because it very much matters. The third Aliyah says like this, third reading. At that time, Moshe separated 3 cities on the east side of the Jordan where the sun rises, so that at a later time when the cities would become active, a murderer might flee there. If a person murders his fellow unintentionally, provided he did not hate them yesterday or the day before, he may flee to one of these cities and live. Betzer in the desert, in the flatlands of the tribe of Reuven, Ramot in Gilead, which belongs to the tribe of Gad, and Golan in the Bashan, which belongs to the tribe of Menashe. So on the Transjordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, Moshe Rabbeinu provides, before he passes away, in the last 37 days of his life, when he's rebuking and educating and enlightening and inspiring the Jewish people, he also sets aside the 3 cities in Transjordan that would eventually become refuge cities. Now, refuge cities was not for murderers. They were people that killed unintentionally. There's an entire tractate of the Talmud called the Tractate of Makkos that talks, a big chunk of it talks about refuge cities. And also some of it talks about malchus, about lashes, the 39 lashes that you could be administered for certain sins. But unintentional, you're standing on a ladder, you're holding a hammer, and you're clopping nails, and the metal part of the hammer goes flying off. By the way, I've seen hammers that I had a mezuzah hammer in my car for a while that I used to use for mezuzahs, and after a while, the metal and the wood decided to divorce each other. And so thank God I wasn't using it when it divorced, but that thing could go flying. So it goes flying off, it hits someone, knocks him out, kills him. Unintentional. And sometimes it's not even negligence. Sometimes it's just life happens. Unintentional and negligent is not the same thing. But the point is, in America, I think they call it manslaughter. But the bottom line is there was no intention here. And there's a system in Judaism. If you want to make sure that the avengers of blood, that the relatives of the relative of the person you just killed don't come and kill you, you better get your tuchas to the refuge city right away. There were signs actually that said miklot, miklot. There were signs all along the way so that anyone in Israel, in any part of the country where they may be, could make their way to one of these refuge cities and find refuge there. And the avengers of the blood are not allowed to go into the refuge city to do anything. If they do, they're considered murderers. If they avenge your blood outside of the refuge city, they go scot-free. In other words, there's some level of permissibility, not encouragement, but permissibility to avenge the blood of your relative. But once they go into the refuge city, they have a court case, by the way. They go to the Beit Din. If the Beit Din says this was not unintentional, he hated him, he plotted it, it was all premeditated, then you get out of the refuge city, you get put to death. Because that's what you get for intentional murder in Judaism. But if it's determined that it wasn't intentional, he did not hate the person, it's not a revenge, and it's not, there's no history there, it was simply an unintentional murder, then they stay in the city of refuge till the high priest passes away, and there's a whole structure for that. On a map, and I'm going to get to the details of what happened with Moshe in a moment, but on a map, it's a little hard to see. I'll zoom into the Facebook. You can see here, in the land of Israel, you have in the north, you have in the Galilee a city called Kadesh. In central Israel, you have a city called Shechem, Nablus. And in southern Israel, you have a city called Hebron. Those were the three refuge cities in the land of Israel. Now, those three cities only happened after Joshua entered the land of Israel. So Hebron, the city that is the silly, ridiculous Israeli government decided to give it, by the way, the one who did that, if we're going to call a spade, that was Bibi Netanyahu with the Y Accord, where he gave Hebron to the Arabs. He gave not only a holy city where the patriarchs and matriarchs are buried, he gave a massive city that is, of course, now a terror hotbed. He gave a massive city that was one of our cities of refuge from biblical time. 1,500 or 1,700 years before Islam existed, we had a refuge city called Hebron. Shechem, Nablus, they also gave back to the Arabs. That was not Bibi, that was someone else, either Rabin, I think it was Rabin, whatever. Another terror hotbed, right in the middle of Israel. Not so far from Netanya, not so far from Hadera, right? That's one of our refuge cities. Kadesh is all the way up north. I don't know what the current name for that area is, but it's in the Galilee, and that was the northern one. But when Moses separated the three in Transjordan, it was Golan and the Bashan, right up north there, the Golan Heights, what you would call, Ramot in central Jordan, and Betzer in southern Jordan, in the Gilead area. Now, we'll talk about how that, these were given obviously before the ones in Israel, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We are also told by the Torah that when Mashiach comes, there'll be 3 additional refuge cities, a total of 9. The other 3 are called Keni, Krizi, and Kadmoni. There's a lot of debate. I shouldn't say a lot. There is some debate in the Midrashim, in the commentaries of where those 3 are located. Some say it's even further south, so almost from Jordan into the area of Saudi Arabia. Others say that it's actually up north in the area that today would be parts of Turkey and Syria. And one opinion even says that it goes all the way to Tunis and Tunisia, all the way in North Africa. But either way, when Mashiach comes, we're going to expand the refuge cities. I already gave a class one year, and I'm not going to do it now again. It was not too long ago. I gave a class on why we would need refuge cities when Mashiach comes. There's not going to be any murder. So there's a whole discussion about that, how it relates to people's behavior before Mashiach comes. But here's what I want to get to today, straight from our parsha, which is very, very relevant. And that is that Rashi says, and I'm quoting, on this, in our Torah portion where it talks about the cities of refuge, Rashi says, Oz Yavdil, Moshe will now separate, when he's separating these 3 refuge cities in Transjordan, Nasan Levli is Chorid. Moses' heart got a little shaken up, got a little frightened, which is why he decided, Sheyavdilim, that he should separate the cities now. And even though these cities won't function as refuge cities until the other ones are separated in the land of Israel. So after the Jews cross into Israel and after they settle the land, it's going to take 14 years of conquering and settling, and then they're going to have their 3 refuge cities, and they will start functioning as refuge cities. Only then will the 3 refuge cities in the Transjordan, in the tribal land of Gad, Reuven, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh, will those 3 refuge cities come into play. And Moshe said, if I have an opportunity to do this right now, let me do it. So we have three questions here. This is from an incredible conversation from the Rebbe later in the later years. It's actually printed in volume 39 of the Rebbe's edited talks. There's only 39 volumes, so it's in the last volume of the edited, meaning they prepared talks that the Rebbe had spoken, and then so his team of transcribers prepared it, and the Rebbe would go over and make his changes, and then it would go to print. So the Rebbe asks three questions on this. Number one, it sounds like when you read the verses, it's at this moment that Moshe went and separated the cities. What happened at this exact time that made Moshe feel compelled right now, not 10 minutes ago, not 12 days ago, not 10 days from now, but right at this moment in our parsha that Moshe felt compelled to go and separate and set aside those three refuge cities in the Transjordan? Obviously something triggered it. The question is what? From the language of the verse, it seems clear that something just happened that made Moshe want to do it right now. Number two, what does it mean Moshe was scared or frightened or shooken up? What shook him up? And number three, it seems like Rashi is combining two ideas. First, the word yavdil, which means to separate, which is clear. It means it's going to happen later, which is why Rashi feels compelled to tell us that even though he's separating the three cities right now, they're not actually going to function until later when the other three in the land of Israel are separated and functional. Only then will they retroactively become functional. What is the combination here of talking about what Moshe was doing and what his fears were and the fact that it's only going to happen later? What's the concoction that Rashi's coming up here with? And why is Rashi compelled to bring all that to the fore? In other words, we always ask that question, what didn't I understand in the verse that I need Rashi to come to? What was wrong? Moshe decided to go and make three refuge cities. There's going to be three refuge cities. He set them aside. Rashi tells us the whole thing. He had to do it right now, but it's not going to function until later. And he wanted to do the mitzvah while he had the opportunity, but he was also scared. And even though it won't function until they go into Israel, what is going on here? There seems to be an emotional response here that's creating both a frightened state for Moshe, a necessity to do things right now, and how it's connected to what happens later. Oh, it does. Very good, Baruch. When a rabbi, after 18 years of teaching someone, has a student that starts getting it on their own, it's a very, very gratifying feeling. So look at that. Now I know what the Rebbe felt like after 40 years of talking to the Chassidim. He must have felt like he was talking to the walls. Then eventually they started getting it. He's like, oh, finally. It only took you guys 40 years. So here's the answer that the Rebbe goes on to explain, which I think is not only brilliant, but really allows us to understand how everything in the Torah, even the chronology, and every Rashi and every nuance is to perfection. And if we just take the time to actually dig deep and not just read things superficially, people read the Torah sometimes like they read the New York Times. I mean, the truth is, I should say here, I don't get involved in politics, but it's not political. After what they did last week, I don't think there should be a Jew in the world that should ever read the New York Times or pay them $1. The blood libel they did about the Jews, they don't deserve not a penny. Every penny you give the New York Times is supporting their blood libels against the Jewish people. Now I'm done my commercial message. People read the Torah like they read a newspaper, but you can't.
What exactly did the New York Times say?
The New York Times. Please don't interrupt, but I'll tell you. The New York Times put a picture of a kid starving in Gaza, talking about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and it was a lie. It was a kid with a genetic disease that had nothing to do, and they put it on their front cover, and when they sent out the retraction, they put it in a place where no one can read, instead of putting it on the front page of the picture with the actual two people that are starving in Gaza, which are the two Ram and Eviatar, the two soldiers that we saw pictures of that are being held in Gaza. But anyhow, I'm done with my rant on the New York Times. I think if people don't get it, they don't get it, and they never will. And like in Germany, the Jews who woke up so late to realize what was being done to them, they were the first ones to end up, God forbid, in the hands of the enemy. But anyhow, Torah has to be learned in depth. By definition, you can read Jewish stories of tzaddikim, of righteous people. You can read Jewish ideas. You can read Jewish articles. If you want to study Torah and really internalize it, that takes work. And what's beautiful about what I read from the Rebbe here is that it's not just a brilliant idea. It gives you the chronology. It gives you Moshe's emotional state. It gives you the urgency of why Moshe felt right now, at this moment, I need to do something about these cities of refuge. It gives you a wholesome, holistic picture of the story, and you could only get there if you're willing to pause and go a little deeper. In the beginning of our Torah portion of Va'eschanan, it says where God tells Moshe, if you want to see it in the verse, I'll show you where to look. It is chapter 3, verse 26, which is on page 1093, you said? No. It's
This question?
Gimel. 1 second. Oh yeah, sorry. Gimel Pavav, yeah. So if you look, sorry, thank you, Seth. If you look at 1082, or 10, again in English, 1083, it says in chapter 3, verse 26, God tells Moshe, God said to me, enough of your requests. Do not speak to me anymore about this matter. God in our parsha told Moshe Rabbeinu, told Moses, after 515 pleas that Moshe made to ask God to let him to go into the land of Israel, 515 pleas. And God finally said, and Moshe admits, God told me, don't talk about it anymore. It's a done deal. So at that moment, it clicked for Moshe. Up until that point, he kept trying. But at that moment, it clicked for him that he's not going into the land of Israel. What does the Torah tell us right after? That when Moshe realized that he's not going into Israel, he's not going to have the great merit, the schus of going into the land of Israel. He's not going to have the opportunity in Israel to set aside the Ari Mikla, the cities of refuge, because he's not going to be there. But he knew there was going to be a command. God already spoke about it in previous parshas that there's going to be cities of refuge. He is not going to Israel. So he said to himself, let me at least get part of the mitzvah. That's why it says at this moment he realized he needs to do it, because it's at this moment that he realized it's done. He is not going. The pleas are over. God said, sit down, pipe down. I don't want to hear about it anymore. You're not going to Israel. So he says, if that's the case, let me at least get part of the mitzvah. Let me get it started. So I'm going to go and separate and delineate to the Jewish people where these three cities are going to be: Golan, Ramot, Gilad, whatever the name, what was the Ramot, Betzer, and Golan, those three cities on the Transjordan. But he did it with a lot of fear and fright in his heart. Why? He realized that those cities are not going to actually become functional until they go into the land of Israel and they do the other three cities. And he started asking himself, maybe, if they're not functional till the other three are introduced in the land of Israel, maybe I'm not even supposed to set them aside in the Transjordan yet. Maybe I'm premature in this. Maybe I shouldn't be doing it. And he thought, especially it could be that if he's getting involved in something that's really only supposed to take place after the Jews are in Israel and he's not going to Israel, he started second guessing himself that maybe it's not the right thing to do. Even though they're not going to be functional, but maybe if they're not going to be functional, that's the biggest proof that it shouldn't be done now. First, let them go into Israel, set aside Kadesh, Hebron, and Shechem, and only then will Joshua or whoever will come to the Transjordan and separate the other three. So Rashi tells us you should know that Moshe was concerned. And nevertheless, despite his concern, we always weigh, every one of us in our lives, we weigh our concerns. Are we doing the right thing or not? And that's a healthy thing. Anyone that always feels like they have the conviction that they're always right, stay far away from them. And for that matter, anyone that you meet that always thinks they're wrong, stay away from them. They're meek. There's an in-between. There's a balance. And the balance is to strive and to work hard to do the right thing, but to always have that sense of trepidation that maybe, what if I didn't get it perfect? People ask me all the time, Rabbi, you speak in public so often. Do you get nervous? What do you think the answer is?
No.
Absolutely.
You don't see it, though.
I'm not talking about when I stand up here at the podium. That's my cozy crowd. This is my sanctuary. This is our people. This is our community. And I'm not giving a lecture on a topic. I'm speaking about the Parsha. You think if I go into a community that I'm not familiar with, where they ask me to come be a guest speaker, I'm not nervous to the point that I stand in front of the mirror for 6 hours before freaking out. I don't freak out that way. But am I nervous? Do I want it to succeed? Do I think 100 times about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to share it and what trajectory? How should I start? What joke? What story? How's it going to come across? What is this crowd into? What are they not into? Of course you do. Of course you're reading the room 100%. Moshe Rabbeinu was an incredible, impactful, the greatest leader that ever lived amongst the Jews. Till today, he's called Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our master. And when he finally hits him that he's not going to go into Israel, he feels compelled to do something to connect himself with Israel and to set aside those cities which would only become functional as refuge cities later. But that was like his little secret entry point to get some connection to something to do with Israel, to something that, what do you say? I'm not going, let me get a little in. But at the same time, he was concerned. He was concerned that maybe I got it wrong. So even a great leader like Moshe, by the way, he didn't share his concerns. Rashi tells us about his concerns. We have no indication that he actually shared his concerns. Again, it's something I spoke about recently. It's not your job to tell everyone that you're freaked out. You're a leader. You got to show leadership. Leadership is not about walking around the whole day fetching that you're not sure you got it right. Leaders have to be decisive. But inside his heart, it was a little shaky, a little frightened. Oh, so that's the key. So many people are scared to do something they think is right because they're worried that maybe it's not. You know, years ago, we had that billboard on Main Street. Yeah, way before your times, even before your times, it said Jewish community in Montana. And then in big, it said, bet your tuchus. We put it up. We put this big billboard. It was up for like 8 months, right near the old Hebes, near the library. Jewish community in Montana, you bet your tuchus. Of course, I got around social media. People send me messages asking me if it's real or was made up. And this was even before AI. I said, of course it's real. So people said to me, do you regret it? Because, 1 or 2 people kvetched about it. Disgrace. What kind of rabbi puts up a billboard with the word tuchus? Do I regret it? No. Did I second guess at certain moments? It wasn't even my idea. It was our marketing team, Ben Bennett from Massive Marketing. My point is, of course, you second guess, but when you're a leader, you have to make decisions and live with those decisions. And unless you did something to harm someone, in that case, you should get up and apologize because that's what you do as a leader. But it wasn't about harming someone, just that other people have a different opinion. It's okay. They don't have to agree with you. It doesn't mean you should back down, but it doesn't mean that in your heart, you're not second guessing it yourself. Moshe Rabbeinu understood that. So he did what he thought was right. He did what he thought was the right thing to do to connect himself to the future by creating by creating the refuge cities. It doesn't mean that in his heart he wasn't 100%. But it also gets more interesting. And this is where the Rebbe takes it to a deeper level that it's just, as we say in Yiddish, it's geschmack. It's delicious.
Sure.
Ask yourself a question, right? Why would you not let the refuge cities in Transjordan become functional until the Jews settle in Israel? They were already settled in Transjordan. And obviously, if you're settled, there's always a possibility that you're going to kill someone by mistake. So why wouldn't you just make those 3 cities fully functional right now? Why wait until the cities in Israel become functional before you make these 3 functional, right? The more basic question. Yes, Rashi told us that the 3 in Transjordan won't become functional until those 3. But why? Why wait? And the explanation is that as long as Moshe was alive, the Jews did not need an Ori Mikla. They did not need cities of refuge. They were so devoted to God, that generation that was going to go into Israel, that the idea that even by mistake killing another person was not a possibility. As it says in our parsha, V'atem advekim b'Hashem Elokeichem, all of you who are bound with God, Chayim kulchem hayoim, you're full of life. They represented life. There was no death. There was no room for death. They were connected to Moshe. They were spiritually charged, on fire for God, which is why they merited to go into Israel, not like the previous generation that died in the desert. And therefore, there was no worry about a cities of refuge. After Moshe passed away and they went into Israel, now suddenly death became a possibility and they needed cities of refuge. And that's why, in another sense, why Moshe was frightened is that he's going to set aside these 3 refuge cities in the Transjordan. For Moshe, that's a frightening idea. Does that mean when I'm going to die, my beloved Jewish people are going to become potential murderers? Something that they hadn't involved themselves in until now? It was very frightening. But at the same time, he wasn't shaken up enough by the fright not to do it. Right? He could have said, listen, I'm a great leader. I want to die. I want to get a presidential funeral. They're going to have soldiers and trumpets. We're going to make a funeral and that's it. And then I don't have to worry. I'm not going to worry about what happens after I die, even though things could happen that are not fun. Not only that, the idea that the same people that I'm leading, that I'm the shepherd of, that I'm shepherding, that they're going to end up becoming potential murderers, even if it's murderers by mistake, I can't even think about that. That's what Moshe could have done. But what he did was, he did what a leader does. He did what a faithful shepherd does. And he said, even though I'm scared, the idea, not scared of making the cities, I'm scared about the fact, I'm frightened that my own flock may end up being in a situation that they would need a city of refuge. I'm going to put my own agenda aside, and I'm going to do whatever my flock needs, even in the future, when they end up killing someone unintentionally and they need that city of refuge. And so I'm going to start the process so that they know that even when things get a little sour after I'm gone, there's a Jewish mechanism, there's a God mechanism, there's a Torah mechanism for how we deal with things. And it's an incredible sacrifice for a leader, right? Imagine someone who spends their whole life. There's famous stories with a lot of people on their deathbed of what comes out of Sam Walton from Walmart, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Lahavdil in the Gemara, there's a lot we read in history, both Jewish history and secular history, about different things that come out of people's mouths. There's actually someone here in Bozeman who on his deathbed said to me, I need a new rabbi. Literally like a few hours before they died. It was pretty humorous. People say a lot of things. Moshe Rabbeinu, the ultimate leader of the Jewish people, at 120 years old, after leading the Jewish people for 40 years, from the Exodus, through the giving of the Torah, through the manna, the rebellions, the Korachs, you name it. He's finally at the entry of Israel, and God says, you're not going in, no more prayers. 515, you're done, genug. And instead of caring about his own agenda, he recognizes, well, if I'm not going to be there with them, I better get the process started for the plan of how they deal with realities that will exist after I'm gone that we never had to deal with until now, because it wasn't a thing. But it will be a thing, and I want to show them not only that I care about them, but that there's a mechanism in place. Even when you do something as horrible as murder. I always tell this to people, when someone commits manslaughter, let's say someone was, bent down. The kids were once, Chaya and Zizi were once in a car with one of our nannies 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and she turned around to give something to Zizi, and in that split second that she turned around, she went at 35 miles an hour, she went straight into a parked car. Then she called us, and it did not sound like a nanny. It sounded like someone that lost their mind. She broke down, basically. She couldn't handle the pressure of knowing that she just crashed her car and the other car and this car. But that's the reality. Someone could sometimes look away for a second, and it's not malicious, and it's not Please don't end up I don't want it on the carpet or the furniture. It's not going to come off.
I will.
Do not bring silly putty to shul. That's my message to everyone. Do not bring silly putty to shul. It does not belong on carpet. Slime. Oh, sorry, slime. No, it's not slime. Slime is worse. The point is, He could have easily, right? There's a lot of people that got it, and you have to live with that your whole life. I actually personally don't think there should be a punishment in this country for manslaughter, for like a real mistake. I don't know what it's called in legal terms, where you literally, you bend down to pick up your coffee and you, God forbid, hurt someone. Because I don't think there's a worse punishment in the world than having to live with that guilt that you took someone's life. Because if you're not a murderer, you're just someone who made a mistake. If you're a murderer, then you planned it and you're obviously some level capable of living with it. But if you're a regular person who just made a mistake, I'm not talking about negligence, just made a mistake. You have to live with it your whole life. What could be a worse punishment than that? So Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to set the ground. He didn't want the Jews, when God forbid their spiritual state, their spiritual state is declining. They should think, oh, if Moshe was here, maybe he could have saved us. Moshe is saying, no, I don't need to save you. Wrong religion. There's a system. System is there's cities of refuge. You got 3 in Israel, proper, Kadesh, Hebron, and Shechem. You got 3 in Transjordan. You have Betzer, you have Ramot, and you have Golan. And when Mashiach comes, there'll be 3 more. You got a system. And I'm going to start the process because I want you to know there's a system to remedy that situation. So that you don't feel hopeless. You don't push yourself down. You don't see yourself in a negative place. You recognize that there's a remedy for mistakes. And just because you're not on the same spiritual level as you were in the desert, which you won't be. You're going into Israel. And yes, Israel's a holier land than the desert, but Israel's a land where you have to work the land. You have to cultivate the agriculture. What'd you do in the desert? You sat and studied Torah and ate manna from heaven. You didn't have to work. You went from being freeloaders to being hard-working farmers and ranchers. And that is going to have a negative spiritual aspect to it. But it's also going to have an incredible spiritual boost to it. That no matter what, there are systems in place for how to deal with the mistakes of life. And too often, too many people are too hard on themselves. I'm not talking about criminals. I'm talking about people who make mistakes. Seriously, but how many times did you make a mistake before it's not a mistake anymore? A lot. How do I know that? Because how many times a day in the Amidah do we say the prayer? How many times a day do we do the Amidah? 3. Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, morning, afternoon, evening, night. What do we say in each one of the Amidahs? What is one of the 19 blessings of the Amidah? Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Not Father, the guy in the booth. Father in heaven. That's where they got the term from. They took my father in heaven, they stuck a guy in a booth who never got married, never had kids, and they talked to him like he's a father. Why'd you call him a father? He's not married, he has no kids. I always tell the priest, it's a chutzpah. I should be Father Chaim. You could call yourself rabbi, but I should be a father. But the point is, forgive us, Father, for we have sinned. And then we say, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed be Lord Chanun, the merciful one, Hamar b'Lisloach, who gives us forgiveness time and time and time again. And we say this 3 times a day. Now, why would you say it 3 times a day? Once is not enough? No. Because chances are between the morning chakras and the afternoon, you probably made a mistake. And guess what? God forgives you again, as long as you show up and realize that you made a mistake. And so Moshe Rabbeinu, before he passed, was such a caring, devoted, loving shepherd of his flock that he not only wanted to inspire them and remind them to behave, he wanted to start the process so that they realize he was part of that process. So even though it's not going to function until later, he wants to get it started so that they know that when it does start functioning, they should not see themselves less than, but they should recognize that it's part of life, that we make mistakes, and Hashem creates mechanisms to how to remedy and rectify ourselves after those mistakes, until we merit a time where there will be no more murder, there will be no more jealousy and animosity and hunger and homelessness, there will be no more churbanos, no more Hamas, no more evil, no more New York Times. The coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, it be speedily nowadays. Amen. Amen.